What were some important cities within the inheritance of Judah? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Joshua on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing Joshua 15, verses 20 to 63, but before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Joshua 15, verse 20, but if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Joshua 15, beginning at verse 20. This is the inheritance of the children of Judah according to their families. The cities at the limits of the tribe of the children of Judah towards the border of Edom in the south were Kabzeel, Eder, Jagur, Kinnah, Dimona, Kadesh, Hazor, Ithnan, Zeph, Telem, Bealoth, Hazor, Hadata, Kirioth Hezron, which is Hazor, Ammon, Shema, Meloda, Hazor Gada, Heshmon, Beth Pelat, Hazor Shual, Beersheba, Bith Jothjah, Baala, Ijim, Ezim, Eltolad, Chesel, Hormah, Ziklag, Madmana, Sansana, Laboath, Shilhim, Ain, and Rimmon. All cities are 29 with their villages. In the lowland, Eshtaol, Zorah, Ashna, Zanoah, Enganim, Tapua, Enam, Jarmuth, Adullam, Soka, Azekah, Sheraim, Adithaim, Gedera, and Gederothoim, 14 cities with their villages, Zenon, Hadashah, Migdal-gad, Delian, Mizpah, Joktheel, Lachish, Bozkath, Eglon, Kabon, Lahmas, Kithlish, Gederoth, Beth-dagon, Naamah, and Makkedah, 16 cities with their villages, Libnah, Ether, Ashan, Jephthah, Ashna, Nezib, Keilah, Akzib, and Marishah, 9 cities with their villages, Ekron with its towns and villages from Ekron to the sea, all that lay near Ashdod with their villages, Ashdod with its towns and villages, Gaza with its towns and villages as far as the brook of Egypt, and the great sea with its coastline. And in the mountain country, Shamir, Jatir, Sokoah, Dana, Kirjasana, which is Deber, Anab, Eshtemoa, Anim, Goshen, Holon, and Gilo, 11 cities with their villages, Arad Duma, Eshian, Janum, Beth Tapua, Aphekah, Humta, Kirjath Arba, which is Hebron, and Zior, 9 cities with their villages, Maon, Carmel, Ziph, Judah, Jezreel, Jokdeam, Zanoah, Cain, Gibeah, and Timnah, 10 cities with their villages, Halhul, Bethzur, Gedor, Marath, Bethanoth, and Elkatan, 6 cities with their villages, Kirjath Baal, which is Kirjath Jearim, and Reba, 2 cities with their villages. In the wilderness, Beth Araba, Middin, Sekaka, Nibshan, the city of Salt, and Engedi, 6 cities with their villages. As for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the children of Judah could not drive them out, but the Jebusites dwell with the children of Judah at Jerusalem to this day. In this chapter, we have seen the borders of Judah being delineated to us. Generally speaking, Judah's borders formed a rectangle in the southern portion of Canaan, conquered in chapter 10. Its eastern border was the Dead Sea all the way down to the border of Edom, south of Kadesh. Its southern border went from there all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. Its western border was the Mediterranean Sea, while its northern border began at the top of the Dead Sea and snakes along until you got back to the Mediterranean. Some of the cities mentioned would help form the borders between Judah and the tribes of Benjamin and Dan. Listed here for us in verses 20 to 63 are the cities that were originally given to the tribe of Judah. However, when we get to the later lots that were cast in Shiloh, we will find that Judah gives up some of these cities to the tribe of Simeon, who will inherit within Judah's borders, and some of the northern border cities will be given to the tribe of Dan. This is not a contradiction in Scripture, for these cities were originally given to Judah, but since Judah had a vast area of land, their borders were given a minor alteration so that the other tribes could receive their portion of land. Now there are a bunch of cities mentioned, many of which we never hear about again. However, what we're going to do, in addition to putting up our maps and pictures of some of these cities, is point out major ones that we'll see later on in Scripture. For those who highlight their Bibles or place notes in them, you might want to pay close attention to the cities and references that are mentioned. The inheritance of Judah can really be divided into 4 parts: the south, the valley or lowland, the mountains, and the wilderness. The south included cities in verses 21 to 32 and would generally be known as the Negev, labeled in brown on our map. Though the south country was largely an arid region, there were numerous wadis and streams that provided fertile spots at intervals where the traveler might rest, cattle might be watered, and corn or other produce raised. Of the cities of note in this region, only a few will be covered in Scripture, those being Beersheba, which we saw back in Genesis 21:31 as one of the places where Abraham and Isaac dug wells; Hormah, which we saw back in Numbers 14:45 as the place that Israel was driven back to by the Canaanites on their failed attempt to take Canaan; and Ziklag from 1 Samuel 27 verse 6 as a residence of David. Before moving on, we will say that the Kadesh mentioned here should not be confused with Kadesh Barnea, which existed outside of Israel's borders. Confusion over this is likely how come there is Kadesh Barnea misplaced on many Bible maps. The Kadesh mentioned here in Joshua 15 would have been in the Negev, probably in the place that is labeled as Kadesh Barnea. However, when Israel sent out spies and later wandered in the wilderness, they did not do so within the borders of what would become the Promised Land. For God swore to the rebel generation that they would not enter the Promised Land, a promise that wouldn't be true had Kadesh here in Joshua 15 be the same as Kadesh Barnea. Coming now to the valley or lowlands in verses 33 to 47, labeled in red. This was the fertile part of Judah and formed a part of the rich plain which has been described as extending northward as far as Carmel. It was known for the beauty of its flowers. Cities of note here are Zorah and Eshtaol, cities that will become important in Judges 13 to 16 in our study of Samson, and Marishah, a city where Asa met Zerah, the Cushite, and overthrew him in 2 Chronicles 14 verse 9. Cities of the Philistines are also mentioned here as originally given to the tribe of Judah. However, Judah didn't overthrow these cities, and so with the exception of during the reigns of David and Solomon, this region remained largely independent. Moving on to the mountain section of Judah, labeled in blue, it extended northwards from near Debir to Jerusalem, attaining at Hebron a height of 2,700 feet. The cities of Maon, Carmel, and Ziph are found in this region, with Maon being the home of Nabal in 1 Samuel 25:2, and Carmel being where Samuel asked Saul in 1 Samuel 15 why he heard the bleating of sheep if Saul utterly destroyed the Amalekites, and Ziph being one of the hiding places of David from Saul in 1 Samuel 23:15. The city of Kirjath-Jearim would be where the Ark of the Covenant would be situated after it was returned by the Philistines in 1 Samuel chapter 7. To go along with this, the Greek Septuagint also adds Tekoa and Bethlehem to this region, with Bethlehem, of course, being important in the stories of Ruth, David, and Jesus, and Tekoa being where the prophet Amos was from. And then finally, the wilderness of Judah, labeled in orange, was the eastern part of the territory of Judah bordering on the Dead Sea. Although it is a wilderness, it is not completely a desert, but cultivation was not typically done there. The city of Salt bordered Edom, and we'll see it mentioned in the days of David and King Amaziah. The En-Gedi was also mentioned as a refuge for David when he fled Saul in 1 Samuel 24 verse 1. It is also mentioned in the Song of Solomon. As for Jerusalem, we have already noted that this city provides the border with Benjamin, but nonetheless, Judah tried to cast out the Jebusites but could not. And the Jebusites lived among Judah to this day, meaning that the book of Joshua was written before the days of the kings, for David would later take Jerusalem and make it Israel's capital. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Joshua chapter 16, verses 1 to 10, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.